Limestone Cafe.
Jiena Marlin Xikluna nagħtikom merħba fil-programm Maltese DownUnder. Grazzi li għażiltu li terġgħu tingħaqdu magħna għal dan il-programm bi produzzjoni mill-Belt ta' Melbourne. Fil-programm illum ser nżuru kunsilliera lokali, ser niltaqgħu ma' ex-Konslu ta' Malta fi New South Wales u llum residenti f'Melbourne u fl-aħħar nett nerġgħu lura fil-kċina tal-MPD Steak Kitchen. Nibdew il-programm billi nżuru lil Angela Altair, kunsilliera mill-lokalità ta' Hobson's Bay.
Well, we came in the very famous post-war migrant boom. And we arrived here in November 1954 on the Sydney, which was the sister ship to the Castel Felice. And yes, so, and then we were mum, dad, and 5 kids, but my sister Sylvia was born here in Australia. So
what are your earliest memories of growing up in Australia compared to being in... How old were you when you got...
I was 8.
You were 8, okay.
And certainly my first memory, of course, is of the very first stay was with our dear Auntie Rita, who's now passed away. Because what happened, my dear Uncle Frank, who's also Savir, who was also supposed to meet us at the docks, didn't turn up. So we had nowhere to go. And the first thing I remember is my dad being very sort of frustrated and worried because we were virtually the last people, you know, at the station pier. And in those days, as it was the Sun News Pictorial, they used to send the photographers and the reporters to, you know, do some colourful stories about families who are disembarking. And he must have thought we were a charming little family. And this reporter tried to take our photo, interview us. And I can remember Dad waving him away. The last thing he wanted to do, of course, was to, you know, worry about doing a story. He was worried about where the hell we're going to go. And we went to what was then a remote part of Sunshine called West Sunshine off Glengala Road, where my auntie lived with her brood of kids. And she kindly put us up for 6 weeks. Some of us stayed in the garage, so Mum and the girls stayed in the garage, and Dad and Tony stayed in the big house.
Oh, wow.
And everything was new and completely novel. And we ran amok, and I can remember we put tea leaves in this electric kettle, you know, the electric jug. I don't know if you remember them. And my uncle, Wensu, he's passed away too, he couldn't wait to get rid of us. And he found a bungalow in at 13 Cannon Street, Sunshine, behind a newly built house by this Turkish Cypriot named Emil. And he got us out of that house as quickly as he could and into our own lodgings. It was just a very humble 2-roomed bungalow. It was even unpainted, you know.
Wow.
And that's where we spent 6 months. By that stage, my dear grandfather, who couldn't read or write, he could only sign his name as an X, joined us because he couldn't bear to be away from his darling Maria, my mum. And then her 2 brothers came. Can you imagine all those people squeezed in a 2-room bungalow? I was the first in my family to get a university degree, but I was always interested in politics because I learned politics on my dad's lap, you know. We used to go through the Sun News Pictorial and he'd, you know, worry if the Labor didn't get up. I just remember that. So I have to say, he gave me a passion for the ALP for that reason.
Angela, you've got the distinction of being the very first Maltese woman who's taken on a mayoral position in Australia.
Yes, indeed.
How did that happen? How did you, like, you know, we know that politics has been a very big part of your life.
Yes.
But how did you make that big step to actually put yourself in office like that?
Well, obviously you get elected as mayor by your peers, and my first position, the first time I was made mayor was in 2002, when I'd been a councillor for Only 3 years, actually. I was selected unanimously, so I must be doing something right. But it's fair to say that I took to local government as a duck to water. Now, it's fair to say too that I knew about local government, but from the other side, because I'd been a journalist for many years, and indeed I did my cadetship on Western Suburbs newspaper. Okay. So I knew about local politics, and I was induced by a fellow councillor who's still a councillor. Shout out to Peter Hemphill. He's the reason that I became a councillor. I had no intention. In fact, when Peter Hemphill knocked on our door to invite me to be his running mate in 1999, and my husband said, no, she's not interested. You know, I mean, I had kids doing HSC, and, you know, I had a full-time job. Anyway, I just thought, oh, well, what can I lose? So it was a bit, I sort of kind of stumbled into it, you know. And then I just thought, gee, you can make a difference, you know, particularly at local level. And I really enjoyed it. And, well, I guess the rest is history. I'm pleased to say that in 2013 I was made mayor again. And I particularly enjoyed that stint because I was able to host a celebration for Maltese in Hobson's Bay. They constitute quite a large cohort, and it was called Merhaba, and it was just fantastic. In fact, they had on display all those things that I suppose define us in some way. You know, from interest in fishing. We all know how passionate people are in fishing, but also it was to celebrate the long-standing community and the significant one of Maltese in Hobson's Bay, particularly the migration to Altair. It was a very strong cohort there, and also some. It featured different people of different ages, you know, who'd made some contribution. And of course, Joe Attard being a prime example of that. He helped to establish the Migrant Resource Centre, and he runs a huge and very successful Maltese community centre. People were invited to put something on the map. There was a map of Malta, and to indicate where they came from. Cool. It was a interactive exhibition, and as a result, Merhaba means welcome in Maltese, and as a result of that, on the doors of our offices, the main civic centre, we've got in permanent sort of on the glass doors the word welcome in numerous languages. I think we've got something like 120 languages represented in Hobson's Bay. We're very multicultural. Yeah. And that's really a nice gesture, you know, it's an embracing gesture to recognise, of course.
And Maltese is one of those languages.
Absolutely. Yeah. And every time I walk in there, and I do it pretty often, as you can imagine, with 18 years on council, always lifts my spirits to see Merhaba there.